Hello. Welcome to the September 2021 session of Galactic Terrors, the online reading series that scours the known universe for scary stories, strange tales, weird horror, dark humor, and all sorts of literary oddities and grotesqueries from the weirdest, wildest, most imaginative authors writing in all sorts of fascinating genres. Tonight we have an amazing lineup of readers: Carol Gyzander, Sarah Reed, and John Edward Lawson. And I'm pleased to welcome Megan Arcuri as our guest host for the evening, giving Carol a night off to thrill and chill you with her fiction. Megan's stories can be found in various anthologies, including Borderlands 7, Madhouse, Chiral Mad, and Chiral Mad 3. She is currently the vice president of the Horror Writers Association and can be found online at meganarcuri.com. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you, Jim. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be the co-host. I've kind of been on both sides of this. I've been a reader, and I've been a participant who's watching all the readers. And I know I have huge shoes to fill in terms of Carol. She's like a wizard up here. So I figure if I can do a fraction as well as Carol does, then I'll be doing all right. So, but thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you could join us. And we've got a lot of great stuff in store tonight and plenty to celebrate. This is our 1-year anniversary, making this our lucky 13th episode, I think, of Galactic Terrors. We started this in September of 2020, and it was originated in response to the pandemic shutdown. We as a chapter, the Horror Writers Association New York chapter, which sponsors this series, would do readings in person at various locations around the city. We did readings in Brooklyn and Manhattan and some other places. And of course, all of that closed up, and we still wanted to do readings. And so we moved this online. I think at the time we thought, well, if we get this going for a few months and have some fun, that would be great. And here we are a year later with more people reading with us, more people listening, and it's been fantastic. So big shout out to all of you who have been sticking with us in the audience, and a big welcome to those of you joining us here for the first time. And I think, Megan, you've got the balloon, so you're the official.
I've also got a party hat, because I feel like you have to have a birthday party with balloons and a hat. So
exactly. And I'm pretty sure Carol didn't anticipate this when she sent me these pictures, but to help celebrate, Carol sent us a few pictures of spooky cakes, and I can't resist, because I think in this particular case, we all deserve a big hand for all of the great work that has been done keeping Galactic Terrors up and running, and especially Carol, who really helps organize us and pull us together every month, and Lou Rera, who does our video production and who provided that really chilling opening for us, our new opening animation, which is like something out of Ed Wood's nightmare, and the kind of movie I think I'd probably sit down and watch multiple times if it actually existed. So, all right. So I think a few other things are going on. We're coming up to what I think when we were chatting before the show, what Sarah Reed called the spooky time,
yes,
which is exciting, October and Halloween. I see we have 51 days until Halloween, which is really barely enough time to start preparing. Are you stocked up on treats yet, Megan?
Well, it depends on what you mean by treats. I mean, haven't gotten the chocolate yet. That'll come soon. But the every year I add a little bit more to the decorations. We'll go out and just grab things here and there. So we're kind of still amassing some things and looking forward to putting them up soon.
Excellent. Yeah, we've been tracking the openings of various Spirit Halloween stores in our area as they come online.
Oh, yeah. So. And that also, if you, I mean, I feel like I have to always kind of plug the HWA, but if you're an HWA member, all members are invited to participate in our Halloween Haunts series. And it's a series of daily blog posts, book excerpts, and more. It offers HWA members a place to share Halloween anecdotes and stories to connect with new readers, spread the word about members' new work, and raise the profile of the horror genre and the HWA. So you can submit something if you'd like. The deadline is September 30th, and Kevin Wetmore is in charge of that. He's amazing. And if you're not a member or if you're a reader, oh, there goes my hat. Just be sure to check it out anyway. It's every day in October, there'll be a new piece available. So you can just go to horror.org to check and see what's going on there.
Yeah, I love Halloween Haunts. There have been some fantastic posts there over the years. That promotion has been running, I think, with maybe 1 or 2 years missed, for close to 10 years now.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, and Kevin is doing a fantastic job with it. So thank you for mentioning Halloween Haunts. All right. So I think we're going to jump into our readings pretty soon. Just a little bit of nuts and bolts stuff. If you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to our Galactic Terrors YouTube channel. That way you'll know exactly when we schedule readings, and you'll get notifications of updates and things like that. And it also makes us look really good to YouTube. And although I try not to share this too much, we really are doing this only to impress the people at YouTube. So the higher we can get our subscription numbers, the better we are, because we'll feel really good about those people counting such things on the YouTube side of the equation. Also like and subscribe, the whole thing. And we have a newsletter, and I'm going to throw the URL up if anyone is interested in signing up for our newsletter. You can do so at the URL on screen. We don't send out a lot of notifications. I think it goes out twice a month, once just to announce the next reading, and a second time as a reminder that a reading is coming up. So we're not going to spam you. We're not going to try to sell you anything. We're not going to send you pictures of our vacations or anything like that.
Maybe.
Right. I don't know. Well, Megan might. She's new now. She's just starting as guest host. She might really want you to know where she was on her summer vacation.
Yeah.
Great. And then another little bit of business. If you are so inclined, feel free to note in the chat where you heard about Galactic Terrors. We're always interested to know where people are finding us or how you're finding our YouTube channel. If you came here just to catch a reading from one of our guests tonight, that's great. Or if you just happen to see a post somewhere. And I see a comment from Nick to throw the newsletter link up in the chat, which I will do in just a bit. So keep your eyes on the chat for that link. Mm-hmm. And oh, great. Okay. FB group. Thank you very much, James Ryan. Yes. So I'm glad that we're reaching people on Facebook.
Awesome.
Nicholas Dyack is a repeat customer. Thank you, Nick.
Yes.
Oh boy. Cthulhu told Christopher Ryan about it. I don't even want to know how that worked. Okay. I was glad you survived, Christopher, to make it here. All right. So what do you think? Shall we jump in?
Yeah, it sounds great. I'm ready.
All right. Our first reader tonight, Carol Gyzander, writes and edits horror, dark fiction, and sci-fi. She's co-coordinator of the HWA NY Chapter and one of the usual co-hosts of Galactic Terrors. Her newest volunteer job is HWA Chapter Program Co-Manager, where she helps support chapters in the U.S. Carol is also the editor of Writer Punk Press, a charity collective that publishes anthologies of punk stories inspired by classic tales. Taught by Time, Myth Goes Punk is their newest anthology. Find her at carolgyzander.com, at Carol Gyzander on Twitter and Instagram. All right. Welcome, Carol.
Hello, I'm reading the beginning of my story, Dust to Dust. Coco frowned and leaned over her console. She brushed the red hair out of her face as she checked the biostatistics of the donor organs they were growing on her side of the lab. The lab tech felt restless and anxious and tried very hard to ignore the combined giggles and moans coming from the bunk room. I wish they wouldn't, she thought. Looking over her shoulder at the handsome dark-haired man behind her, as she did so often, her face relaxed and she smiled a bit. Mark, how are you doing on the new unit? If everything is okay, maybe we could take a break together when Peter's gone? Mark? No answer from her fellow technician. She sighed, then tried to smile. Hey, do you think we can get done with this in time to play one of those games together? Maybe enjoy each other's company again? I'd like that. The dark-haired man kept staring at his console while his fingers rested on his keyboard. She rolled her chair a bit to see what he was looking at and found he was staring at his own reflection on the screen. Again. His fingers moved to stroke his strong, chiseled jaw. Come on, Mark, talk to me, please. We could make a special dinner and hang out and talk, and it'll be fun. No response. She tried once more. You used to like it when we did that, but it's been so long. Okay, I'd just love to spend some time with you. It seems you're always preoccupied, looking at yourself and not at me. And we're the only ones here except when June or Peter check in, and now I'm nervous about Peter in there. Please, Mark, I just want you to be happy. She reached a hand out toward him, but paused, watching him watch himself. Hand extended in midair, her shoulders slumped, and she sank back into the chair at her station. Her pale blue eyes swam with tears, and she blinked them away. You're just like him, aren't you? Everything is all about you. When the proximity alarm rang, she jumped and spun around to check the camera display on the security airlock. It helped keep their existence secret. Growing organs was still considered unethical by many. Oh no, June, this could get ugly. She ran over and rapped 3 times on the door of the bunk room, nodding in grim satisfaction as the noises stopped abruptly at her coded signal. She returned and sank into her seat, watching on the screen as June entered the airlock and tapped the code to come into the hidden black laboratory. Speaking over her shoulder, she said, I hope this doesn't turn into a horrible scene. No response from behind her. Turning around, she stared at Mark. Don't you think June will be angry? Mark shrugged. He continued working at his console, occasionally moving so that he could see his own reflection in the computer screen. Then he reached out to touch the image, smiled, and nodded at himself, went back to work. She reached a hand across the space between them again, paused, and lightly touched his shoulder. Don't you even care about me, Mark? What if she gets angry at Peter and shuts us down? What will happen to us? Mark finally turned to look at her. We'll be fine. It can't be that important. They can't get rid of us. We're copies of them. And he turned to smile at his reflection in the monitor, shrugging off her hand. The metal door to the black laboratory swung open, and June stepped into the cramped station. The owner of the secret medical lab pulled back the hood that had been concealing her features while she traveled, revealing the gray streaks in her fading red hair, the tired lines in her face, and the redness of her pale blue eyes from the dust storm outside. The lab tech glanced up at June and then away. This is what I'll look like in 25 years? Don't know if that's age or what the outside world does to you. I'm almost glad we never leave here. The lab owner smiled at the two of them in the control room, then came and stood next to her, stroking the younger woman's red hair and looking through the window into Lab 1 that was monitored by her console. Hello, Coco, sweetie. How are you? I see all 4 units are still growing well. That's a good girl. Any problems? She leaned against June's hand for a moment and then shook her head. No, June, everything seems just fine. The organs are developing on schedule. I didn't expect you for 2 more weeks. June frowned. I came to check because we got a system notification that the supply of viable bioash was running low. What's up? Did a lot of organs fail and you had to remake them? Oh no. I told them June would notice. Well, you see, we had to recycle some of them into bioash and start over. We thought we'd done it all right, but I guess the pancreas didn't take correctly. So, she sat up and gave a tight smile. Oh, so that's why you're here early. How was your trip? I missed you. June arched an eyebrow. I'd come more often if I felt it was needed, but we made you two with the capability to handle this all yourselves. And it's more secure to have the drones deliver the organs to the buyers, not us. The lab owner started to turn away toward the bunk room, frowning. What's that noise? Oh, crap. Don't go in there. Well, perhaps there might be a problem with the one on the end, the liver that we're growing for that banker. She gestured at the growing station on the left. June turned back and peered through the window into Lab 1. Show me the stats. What seems to be the problem? She directed June's attention to the blood oxygen level on the relevant screen in response. Here, look at this. The blood ox seems to be a bit low, doesn't it? June frowned. It looks fine to me. Is that all? Well, if we look at the electrolytes in the clone system, I'm not sure they are. June pushed her aside. Let me look. The boss sat down and worked the console for a few minutes, flipping from screen to screen, forehead wrinkling in concentration. Mark continued entering data into his console, smiling at his reflection in the window over the screen. She stood next to him, fingers twisting before her. Why isn't he even worried? And how long can I stall the boss? June sat back from the console. I don't see anything here to worry about, Coco. Do you really think there is a problem? Mark, how long until... They all looked up as the door from the bunk room opened and Peter came out, smoothing his dark hair and tucking in his shirt. Mark leapt up and assumed the same posture as the older man, holding his head back to match the defiant pose of Peter's strong, chiseled jaw. June's eyebrows rose as the sound of giggles followed her husband in from the bunk room. Peter, darling, I didn't think you'd be here. What's going on? He shrugged. Oh, just thought I'd stop by and check in. I didn't realize you were coming today. He moved to shut the door behind him, but his wife stood up and blocked the door, glancing inside the bunk room for a long moment. June pulled the door closed, shoulders slumping, and turned to look at Peter. Oh, no. Her heart clenched at the betrayal she saw in June's reaction. She looked back and forth between the two men, noting the similarity of not only their features, but their attitude. No remorse. They're so much alike, like they are the center of their world. Really? Said June to Peter. 3 Junes? And they all look like me, just 25 years younger, just like this one. She gasped with shock when the boss gestured at her before continuing to address Peter. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? Peter shrugged. Well, it's like it was you, sort of. He grinned sheepishly and tilted his head to one side, stroking his strong jaw. Not like really being unfaithful. June tensed, staring at Peter with arms crossed and lips tightened, then turned around to glare at the two technicians, looking from Mark to her. You knew. You had to have made those full copies of yourself, and then you delayed me with your endless chatter so that he wouldn't get caught. No wonder we're short of bioash. Can you deny this? She hung her head. No, ma'am. He told Mark to make a copy of me, full copies, not just organs, so that the copies would look like me or you. We had to rig the machine. He said there were no parameters for making a full copy of a clone before. She looked up into the angry face that seemed like she would 25 years from now, if she lived that long. I tried to tell him it was wrong, but he wanted what he wanted. The chilled silence stretched out. June stared from Peter to her, with a glance at Mark, who was looking at Peter with puppy dog eyes. Back to her. Come on, I can't have this insubordination. Into the replicating room, both of you. The boss snapped her fingers, grabbing Peter's arm and propelling him toward the glass window door on the far side of the console room. You and I will talk this out later. This is a business, not your secret playground. For now, get in there and help me. Come on, Coco. She followed the couple into the replicating room, her hands slick with sweat and her stomach tight. She obeyed June's direction to lie on the sliding platform and crossed her arms over her chest so that she would fit into the tunnel, just like she had done at Peter's earlier instruction, but this time she was positioned by the output tube and not the input. June sat at the control bank, pushed some buttons so that the machine throbbed to life. Vroom, vroom, vroom. Then keyed the buttons that slid her into the machine. She stared at her wide-eyed reflection in the shiny walls of the tube. June hadn't even bothered to put the protective headphones on her. She couldn't hear everything they said, but some of June's words came through. We need to make some adjustments to her. I won't have this. Too much talking. Here, help me adjust the thrumming of the machine rose in frequency. Wee, wee, wee. She squinted her eyes as the sound became stronger. Then we need to modify this part, Peter. Check this code. The oscillation in the machine grew faster. Om, om, om. She felt the platform vibrate a bit, and she held very still. After what seemed an eternity, the noise died down, and the platform slid out of the tube. June helped her sit up and checked her pupils with a small light. Okay, I think it worked. How are you feeling? She took a moment and assessed her condition. Nothing seemed different. Feeling? Yes, can you understand everything I'm saying? Saying? June nodded her head. Perfect. I think you'll cause no more problems. No more problems. Her hands flew to her mouth. That wasn't what I meant to say. She opened her mouth to ask what June had done to her, but no words came out. Her lips hung open as her jaw worked. Tears filled her eyes. No words came out. Thank you, and I'll stop there. There's more to the story, but that's off in the anthology.
Thank you so much, Carol. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Very
Fun
nice.
to get to read that.
Now, I'm curious, and I'll tell the audience, go ahead and put some questions in the comments if you'd like to ask any Carol any questions. As I noted, she might even answer them. I'm curious why you chose to read that particular story.
Okay. Well, this is a brand new anthology that we have out from Writer Punk Press. And this is it's a charity press that we have put together. We've done 6 anthologies. They all benefit a no-kill animal shelter on the West Coast called Paws Animal Rescue. Each anthology is a series of punk stories, maybe cyberpunk, biopunk, steampunk, diesel punk, on a particular theme. And this anthology's theme is myth, folklore, and legend. So since we are a coordination of people who work together, we have several editors. I'm the overall editor of our group. Since we had somebody to edit my story, I was able to put a story in myself. So that's the one I put in this anthology. And not to talk endlessly, but it's based on the myth of Echo and Narcissus.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
And we do have one question that sort of goes right to that, which is, what antho is that? Can you give us the title again?
Yes, it's called Taught by Time, Myth Goes Punk. And in a few minutes, I can put the link in the chat. So.
Excellent. All right. And we do have a couple of other questions, but I did want to just bring one comment that got me laughing. This is courtesy Nicholas Dyack, referencing America's greatest musical artist. I think I'm a clone now. There's always 2 of me just hanging around. Very nice. Thank you.
I'm a clone now. There we go.
That's it. Episode 13. We've gone musical.
Yeah, we might have to pay royalties if we do too much of that. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. And Nicholas had a question to go with that. What are some of your favorite films dealing with cloning, if you have any?
Ooh, that's interesting. Not exactly cloning, but this is a slight tilt on it, but I'm a big fan of The Fly, both the early versions and the end ones, because he's not exactly cloned, but he's replicated in another place. And we know that doesn't come out quite as well as it should. So
that's true in either version. And we have a question from Christopher Ryan. So when you are writing from myth, how do you break away from strict quoting of myth and get to your original voice, which is evident?
Oh, thank you, Chris. That's a really good question. The first thing that I wrote where I was based on a classical source, it was kind of a disaster because I couldn't get away from, paraphrasing what was going on. So it has been a conscious effort on my part to try and do that. In this case, the story of Echo and Narcissus, Echo is a young nymph who is infatuated with life, and she's vigorous and living, and Juno comes to find out what her husband, the god Jupiter, has been doing. He's off dallying with some dryad somewhere, and Echo sort of stalls the jealous Juno from finding out about it by talking to her endlessly and going on and on and on. So I did put that part in the story a little bit, but I tried to change it up as much as possible. And I find that changing to a completely different genre really helps. You know, this is a cyberpunk, biopunk kind of story. And the only reason I think that we do want to do something based on another story is to tell something different. The original mythology has its own points, but in this case, as we get toward the end, I make the point that much of biopunk does that, yes, people can do things that they couldn't do before, but really, should they? Should they be doing this? And that's sort of where the end of the story goes.
Very cool. Yeah, that was it. That was a great question. Thank you, Christopher. And a great answer, Carol. You got a lot of comments complimenting your reading, your style, the rhythm of your reading. And so what do you do to prepare for a reading, or have you had any training for reading or performing?
Well, thank you for asking. I have taken a couple classes. Actually, Jim Freund from the New York Review of Science Fiction did a great class at, I think, might have been the last Lunacon convention that was done. But I tend to print it out in big print so I can see it on the paper. And then I actually will go through and highlight the, in different colors, the dialogue so that I can remember who's saying what to whom. Mm-hmm. And that helps me keep straight who's talking. Sometimes if I'm working on a place with a microphone, you know, when the microphone is here in your face, I'll go so far as to turn my head this way for this character and that way for the other. And it makes a subtle difference in the sound that helps the listener differentiate. So it doesn't work quite as well with a laptop, though.
Right. No, that's terrific. That's great. There's a lot to giving a good reading. A lot of preparation goes into it. I think people sometimes underestimate it, but that's amazing.
I always time it. This time I did sneak by. I think I was 10.5 minutes. Sorry.
That's quite all right. That's okay. It's your night off. You can have a little fun.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Dad.
Night off is co-host. Right. One more question, I think. Let's see, from Michelle Brittany. If you write another mythological based story, which mythical story would you want to tackle?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah. I have been obsessed with the Odyssey and the Iliad, and I think that would be really fun to do. But I'm now spoiled because in this anthology, we have a novella at the end, which is nanopunk version of the Odyssey. And it was just like, you know, and my kid Rowan, who I believe is listening, was one of the early readers of this with me, and because they're a classical scholar, and they were just thrilled with how good that was. So, you know, I'm happy to have it get out into the world finally. Now that the world is, you know, opening up, we were able to publish this one again. There's also a story by Teal James Glenn in this, Black Sails. Yeah, excellent.
Which myth did Teal tackle?
The story about how Theseus was coming home from the wars, putting up a white sail or a black sail, depending on whether it was good news or bad news with his return. So he took that into a very different genre as well.
All right. So there's definitely some good reading for everyone to look up.
Yeah.
And before we move on to our next reader, I just have to share one comment from Jonathan Lees that came in earlier at the show because it just made me laugh. Jonathan posted simply, in response to nothing I can see in the comments, candy corn. So I guess we're headed for that time of year. Yes, the candy corn is coming. Be patient, Jonathan. You will have the candy corn soon.
Excellent.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Carol. We'll have you come back at the end to talk some more about what you have coming up next. All right. Our next reader tonight is Sarah Reed. Sarah is a dark fiction writer in the frozen north of Wisconsin. Her short stories can be found in various places, including Ellen Datlow's Best Horror of the Year volumes 10 and 12. Her short fiction collection, Out of Water, is available from Trepidatio Publishing, as is her debut novel, The Bone Weaver's Orchard, both nominated for the Bram Stoker, This Is Horror, and Ladies of Horror Fiction Awards. Orchard won the Stoker for Superior Achievement in the first novel and the This Is Horror Award for Novel of the Year. Orchard is also available in Spanish under the title El Jardín del Talador de Huesos, and please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing any of that, published by Dilettante Mentes, where it has been nominated for the Guillermo de Baskerville Award. Very cool. When she's not staring into the abyss, she knits. You can find her online at Instagram or Twitter at Inkwell Monster, or on her site at www.inkwellmonster.wordpress.com. Please welcome Sarah Reed.
Hi, my friends. It's so good to see my HWA family here. I'm going to be reading the first part from my story, Bloody Bon Secours, from the Violent Vixens anthology. I stood before the tall woman draped in black, Sister Mary Anthony, though we were to call her Mother Superior. The implication clear that we, fallen women as we were mother inferiors. And who was I to argue? There were more children here in her care at the Bon Secours home than I had ever been charged with altogether, if you counted all the houses in which I'd worked. I'd nannied 50 children, none of them mine, and she, the superior of all mothers, had taken in thousands. And now she'd taken me in, as she would take in my child when it was born. And I wondered if that would make her more its mother than I. The thought heated my face, squeezed my throat tight till I coughed. The sound cut off Mother Superior's lecture. She'd been extolling on the gravity of my shortcomings, but the look on her face as I cleared my throat said more than all the words she'd thundered for the past 10 minutes. A cough at Bon Secours was the beginning of the end. If a girl had a cough, it was probably too late to save her, body or soul. I wasn't ill, but it was definitely too late to save me. Mother Superior nodded to the nun standing behind me, Sister Catherine Francis, who had led me from the taxi to this office in solemn silence. She led me down another arm of this H-block stone house to a bathroom where my hair was shorn, and I was showered and dressed in a different linen smock than the one I had arrived in. I was put to work straight away in the nursery, where I'd earn my keep until my time came. They called it my time as if it belonged to me. The girls here say it often, when my time comes, with a tone that makes it unclear whether they're speaking of birth or death. The boundary between the two is so thin anyway. Your time isn't far off, Meredith, they tell me, eyeing the growth round my middle. I hadn't even known. Not until the day I couldn't fasten my dress and I'd taken it to Mrs. Cranshaw to help me let it out. And instead she'd cast me out, all a fury, me in tears, staring desperately down at my stomach. It should have been so obvious, just as the worn patch of carpet in the corner of Mr. Cranshaw's library where he'd made me kneel should have been obvious. Do you think the father will change his mind and claim it? Lucy asked. She was so sweet, hopeful, sang to her belly every night. I shook my head. No, he's married, has a kid of his own. Lucy paled, clearly scandalized, but too sweet to say so. So you weren't in love? Poor Lucy. It must have been so easy to break her heart. No, but I loved his little one. Andrew Cranshaw. I missed his small hands and playful antics. I'd loved all my charges. I might not be any Mother Superior, but I had done my best. Lucy had been right about one thing, though, and my time did come quickly. I had only been at Bon Secours a few weeks when my time ran in a rush down my legs and erupted in a crest of pain unlike anything I had ever known. Eventually, that wave dragged me under and far away. And the next thing I remembered was waking to silence in a tangle of stiff linens. I drew my feet up away from the tack of dried blood, and the blanket held the shape of my legs where it had molded to me in my sleep, like a ghost of me lay in that bed. Meredith. Sister Catherine Francis stepped up to the bedside. I turned my head toward her, and my throat wrenched. My lips stuck fast when I tried to ask for water. She guessed my meaning and poured some from a pitcher on the bedside table. "It's been 3 days," she said as she handed me the glass. My hand shook as I raised it to my mouth. "Mother Superior already read you the last rites." Mother Superior. Mother. I dropped the glass, the shock of cold water spreading across my lap. My baby? She prayed over him too, though I'm afraid we didn't have time to baptize him. The grip of pain ran deeper than all the aches and tears of my body. The whole world had split into 1,000 shards, and I swallowed all of them dry. "Do you think you can walk?" Sister Catherine asked. I pushed myself to hit higher and shoved the blanket away. Scratches and bruises ran down my legs. My empty stomach, still distorted from the life it had carried, I stood and advanced on the nun, drawing so close to her that my eyes were shaded under the awning of her wimple. "Where is he?" She met my countenance with a scowl of her own. "I see that you can walk. Good. You leave first thing tomorrow morning." She turned away in a swirl of black and made for the door. Shock overcame my rage. "Leave?" Sister Catherine looked back at me, her hand on the door's latch. "This is a home for mothers and children. You're neither." If comfort was a sin, as the sisters would have had us believe, then Mother Superior was damned long before I picked the lock on her chambers. Her rooms were warm, heated by a humming radiator, her blankets thick, her nightgown smooth. Free of a wimple, her hair hung in a long brown braid that coiled across her pillow. It was long enough to circle her throat 3 times, and when I pulled hard enough, I could wrap it a 4th. Her face burned the purple of bishops, her eyes springing red poppies across the white. Her tongue dripped froth as it inched further down her spotted chin. Her arms flailed beneath the heavy blanket, trapped beneath the weight of all that warm wool and me, sitting beside her and pinning the cloth to the mattress. It took so long for her to be still. It was like waiting for a sermon to end. When your baby is kicking your bladder. Baby. The thought gave me strength. I wrapped the braid a 5th time, pulling till the roots sprang free from her scalp. She had a fine carpet bag in the closet, sturdy shoes close enough to my size. But her desk in the adjacent room, where I'd so recently sat and was judged, that was my target. My file was there, one of hundreds, Lucy's too. I recognized the address at the top of my first page, the Cranshaw's house in Galway. There was information about my posting in the nursery, the storage box number where I would find my own dress, another address, perhaps where they had intended for me to go in the morning. I would take that car, but it's the first address I'd be giving the driver. Sister Catherine's yellow hair was shorn close to her skull, much like she had done to all of us. Perhaps the lice that plagued all the linens had found their way beneath her wimple. Her Bible, dutifully at her bedside, was heavy and bound in etched brass, the painted whore of Bibles, and it came down hard and fast against her pale temple. She did not even wake from the first blow to feel the 2nd or the 5th, and by then the pages were as red as communion wine or birthing linens. I retrieved my dress from storage, washed myself, changed, and made my way to the dormitory. The sound of soft breathing and the smell of sweet milk circled the room. Lucy sat up when I grabbed her shoulder. "Oh, Meredith." She gripped my hands in hers. "I'm so sorry." My heart galloped. I breathed deep to hold my purpose. "I'm leaving in the morning, Lucy. Mother Superior's just told me. But she's ill and can't see me off. Neither can Sister Catherine. They both ate the same dinner, and neither can so much as walk." Lucy cooed sympathy. I couldn't suppress a smile. Too much rich food. Maybe they should stick to porridge like the rest of us. Lucy smiled weakly and squeezed my hand. "Where are you going?" "Back to Galway. I'll settle my business there, and then who knows? Will you tell the others? About the sisters, I mean? They'll have to get by without them tomorrow." "Yeah, we'll be fine." Lucy's eyes were already beginning to slide closed again. It was nearly dawn, and the matin bells would be ringing soon. Did the same fate I'd met await her? In all the weeks I'd worked in the nursery, not a single infant had come through the doors, though plenty left, wrapped in gray sheets that reappeared after a haphazard laundering. I sat against the wooden door and waited for the car. It was the same driver who came for me, his eyes cast down to the gravel as he placed my bag, Mother Superior's bag, on the seat. It was stuffed full of files. The drive seemed longer this time, as if I had come from so far away, another world instead of the next town over. Why do you do all the driving for the home? I asked the young man. Figure I owe it to him, born and raised in those walls. My heart went out to the boy. He could have been anyone's. He might as well have been mine. And was your mother like me? His complexion deepened and his knuckles whitened on the wheel. Wouldn't know, was all he said. Of course she was, I wanted to say. We're all the same there. Mother inferiors. The car pulled up in front of the familiar townhouse. Only 2 windows glowed. The library at the top of the house, where Mr. Cranshaw would be taking his tea and paper, and the basement where the kitchens would be hard at work. It was too early for anyone not driven by nuns or wages to be awake. Mrs. Cranshaw would still be asleep, and small Andrew. Wait here, I told the driver. I just need to pick something up. I won't be long. I'll stop there.
Wow. I'm pretty much gutted over here. That was amazing, Sarah. Thank you. You know, I'm seeing some things in the comments, and I noticed it myself. The imagery was really unbelievable. I loved your use of color in particular, and I loved how you used the color and kind of threw it back on religious imagery as well, with the purple of bishops and some, I don't remember all of them, but it was really, really well done. And it seemed almost poetic to me in a way. And you are also a poet, is that correct?
Yeah, I do write poetry also.
Yeah, I felt like I could feel it as I was listening to that story. Was that the end, or did you say you were reading a piece of it?
That's about the first 2/3 of it. There's a couple more scenes.
Okay. That one, we need to finish that one. That was delicious. We had talked prior, and I wanted to know a little bit more about the setting. Is this something that was, of your imagination, or is this something that you had read about or, had seen or something?
Yeah. Well, the Bon Secours Homes for Mother and Children is a real place. Well, it was until the 70s. And it's in Tuam, Ireland. And when I was in Ireland as a teenager, that's where I did my homestay. And at the time I was there, nobody knew anything. The home had been closed for over a decade. It was abandoned. But not long after I left, it was revealed there was a mass grave of infants and children discovered on the grounds, and records were missing. And it turns out that the nuns at Bon Secours were not on the up and up, and they were in fact adopting out children, selling children, not taking care of them. They became ill and died, and they actually buried them in the septic tank.
Oh my gosh.
So not a nice place, and I had walked by there so many times, and it was a heartbreaking story, and it really broke in the news about a year ago. It became kind of a big headline and big scandal and blew up. So it was such a sad story, and it made me want revenge, even though it was before I was born. But so I channeled that into this piece that's in the Violent Vixens Grindhouse Horror Anthology, edited by Eric Sundquist.
Oh, you can absolutely feel that revenge, and it feels good. I mean, that felt good, and it happened so fast. It's amazing how much you packed into that short beginning, and you really hate those nuns, and you're almost glad that you're kind of glad that she did what she did. So, there were a bunch of questions in the chat. So let me see if I can scroll back. I know, where are we going with, okay, Nicholas had a question. Nicholas was wondering how much of this story was initially written longhand in fountain pen, and which fountain pen did you use?
Good question, Nick. All of it was written by hand initially in fountain pen. Probably more than one, though. I did not write this one in one sitting. So it's probably a rotation of fountain pens. I don't remember which ones. It was a while ago.
And do you write all of your stories longhand using a fountain pen? Is that your...
Ideally, yeah, most of the time. Sometimes when deadlines are, squeaking right up, I don't have time to indulge in handwriting, and instead it's, in an email draft here and a Google Doc there, and I have to pull the pieces together because I just, type it into my phone wherever I can get it.
There's only so much time, right? So when you handwrite, and do you do more of the editing as you're typing it into Word or whatever program you're using?
Yeah, okay, definitely. And that's part of the appeal of that process for me, is by the time it's typed, it's, a third draft.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Let's see, we had another question from Justin Case. How do you relate to politics in fantastic fiction? I ask because next month on a convention in Denmark, I'll be moderating a panel on political fantastic fiction.
Oh, well, that's a good question. I don't think any writing is apolitical, so I think there's always that in any of our stories. But I also think that once it leaves, our draft, and once it's published and out in the world, and the reader brings their own experiences to that story and transforms it, which is, I think, part of the alchemy of story and what makes it so important to all of us. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's fun to interpret stories different ways and see what readers get out of it that you hadn't put there, but they still found.
It's true. We have another. As Robert Atone points out, you're getting a lot of hardball questions here. Teal James Glenn asks, why/how did religion fit into your approach to writing horror?
Well, I mean, I don't have religion of my own, but my one side of my family is Mormon and the other side is Catholic growing up. So there was, some intensity.
Yes, so, on both sides. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I've found myself, I think I have a lot of personal resentment toward organized religion.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, a lot of the calls I was asked to write for this year had these kind of undertones or subtext. So this year I ended up writing a lot of somewhat religious horror. So there's another one out in The Bad Book, edited by John Taff, which is that one is about a psychic detective hunting down a religious fanatic. So that one kind of goes into some similar religious territory.
That's great. That is wonderful. Let's see. I'm hoping I'm not missing too many, but there is another one from Christopher Ryan. Do you plan use of color and symbolism before you write, or do you go back and seed it during a rewrite?
Both. Sometimes that's just how I see it when I'm writing that first draft, but sometimes it'll be when I go back through, I'll see an opportunity to add more of that in, because I do like doing that.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm just looking to see if there's any. Oh, here we go. Just a comment from Justin that the readers do find stuff in our fiction that we hadn't thought of, which is absolutely true.
Yeah.
And a lot of, well dones and bravos for your reading, which was your reading itself was also really well done. I mean, it was totally engaging. So Jim asked Sarah, Carol if she had, had any training or experience. What is your training and experience with reading? Had you take any classes, or do you have any acting experience or anything like that to help?
I did used to act way back in the day. I did stage acting and musicals and things like
Awesome.
that.
Awesome.
But probably more recently relevant is I'm a librarian, and right now I do programming, which involves a lot of reading to people and reading, especially to children. But I also love to do story time for adults because we need story time too. It's important.
And so, do you read out loud to adults as well?
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
Short stories by, like, you know, classics. When we first shut down for the pandemic and went virtual, I started reading Jane Eyre. We got about halfway through.
That's fantastic. I love it. So was it this kind of setup, or do you also do it at the library in person?
I used to do it at a local cafe for the library in person.
Okay.
And I'd read short stories. I read some Joyce Carol Oates, and things like that. So all kinds of just fun reading to do. And at the cafe there, I'd bring coloring sheets, and we'd get they could visit the bar. I couldn't because I was on the clock, but they could go to the bar and get tacos and drinks and eat and color, and I would read to them.
That sounds amazing. I want to live where you
Right?
live.
I miss it. I knew COVID. I need my story time back.
Yeah, I'll have to start that again. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah,
I apologize if I missed any other questions in the chat, but I feel like we need to maybe move along a little bit, and we'll get back to Sarah at the end. So if there's other things that anybody needs to or wants to ask her, we will have an opportunity to do so. So thank you, Sarah. That was wonderful. Really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. Our next reader, I'm honored to introduce John Edward Lawson. John Edward Lawson's novels, short fiction, and poetry have garnered nominations for many awards, including the Stoker and Wonderland Awards. In addition to being a founder of Raw Dog Screaming Press and a former editor-in-chief of The Dream People, he currently serves as vice president of the Diverse Writers and Artists of Speculative Fiction. You can find him on Twitter and Instagram. His handle is @BizarroGuy. And his website is www.johnlawson.org. Welcome, John.
Good evening. What I'm going to be reading for you tonight is a selection of 3 poems. The first of which is Hemophobia. Sugar cream, stucco, slathered, binding together her emotions with store-bought sponge consistency, absorbing all intent and light, chocolate, chips, and screams, and father's diabetes afforded him the doctor's note required to slip out of this duty. And how many times did I lose the stare down with that carefully sculpted sentinel rising from the dining room table, placed so it was inescapable on the way to whatever fleeting freedom slouched beyond our front door. Layer 2. Mom, what are these hard bits here in the cake? Don't you worry about that. Keep eating. But when I try to bite them, it hurts. Mom, are these teeth? It's just baby teeth. They're soft inside. Don't be weak. Just crunch right on through. The core has like protein and vitamin D and whatnot. Oh my God, some baby is crawling around with bloody mouth sockets? No, they're your brother's baby teeth. You forgot about him already? It's not like that, Mom. I didn't know. Do I have to? Every meal we put in front of you is stolen from the life that he could have lived, you ingrate. I'm sorry. I'll be good. I'll eat. Layer 3. With each bite you take of me, you become less yours and more my plaything. That was Hemophobia. Vehophobia. Hello, is this 911? Silence. Is this 911? I need help. Yes, sir, this is 911. Please state the nature of your emergency. My vehicle has gone off the road and I think, going all the way down the mountain, most of the way, I flipped over a bunch of times. I don't know, but I think I'm really hurt because I can't move. I had to use the Bluetooth commands in my dashboard just to call you. Sir, don't try to move. Can you tell us your location so that we can dispatch responders? I was on Route 68 before you get to Cumberland. You know, the tallest mountain elevation in Maryland. I can't remember the name. I was coming down from the peak. You know that curve? It's so long and steep just past the runaway truck ramp. And just from behind, there's this horrible noise and this truck, the tractor trailer, skidding sideways on the snow and the ice. It wasn't supposed to snow like this today. Muffled sobs. Sir, I did not call so you can rescue me. I just want you to be able to find the body so my family won't have to worry about me being lost or trying to skip out on my life or who knows what, some kind of liquid or something cold. My leg. Oh, God. There's another car. The truck hit before me. The tail end smashed a white sedan up against the end of the rocks just before the sheer drop off, and the whole truck fishtailed around to the left and hit me from the side like a street sweeper or something. Just sent both of us tumbling to the right. I think it's further up the mountain than I am the truck, closer to the road. So you need to find those two drivers and try to help them first. Long silence. Well, hello? Sir, I want you to listen very carefully. Can you do that for me? Yes. Today is July 1st. Silence. You have been calling every month since February. Your body was recovered. We keep losing dispatchers because of your calls. I'm the supervisor here. I don't know what else to do. I'm sorry if it's harsh, but please try to understand and don't call again. I know it's you because we matched up the voice in the recordings from the call that came in before you passed away. Sir, would you like me to repeat this? No. Thank you. Thank you. The line goes dead. This will be my last one for tonight. Heliophobia. Without fail, every morning you lose yourself, erasing words, depriving your screams of volume. The act terrifies you, and the resulting joy binds your compound, fractured identity. You have always known how to perform laryngectomy, how to be jubilant without hopefulness, how to despair without glee. The choice is always multiple and the most basic function of subordination. You were loved too well by that jailer lurking in the mirror, cloying, with fingers moistened by anger excitation, the one who paraded your ham-handed confession, your hastily signed conservatorship, your tear-stained resignation, and the public somehow adored that diminutive, withered, under-imagined version of you. After being resigned to die in the shadows, can you flay yourself and live with your own beauty? The rusted steel in death's dentures does not tear at your flesh half so frightfully as relocating your boundaries outward, moving beyond the demilitarized zone of your relationships, becoming a refugee from your own mental state, with your prefrontal re-education center's message blaring in the distance. What will you be ready to hear? The volume of your screams deprived, words erasing yourself, lost every morning without fail. And that was the end of my third piece for you this evening. Thank you very much for being here with me.
John, thank you so much. Those poems were wonderful.
Incredible.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This is my first time reading them, actually. So.
Oh, wow.
Are they?
Thank you for sharing them with us. Yeah.
A trio? Are they? Did you write them together, or did you have them in mind together when you were writing, or was it kind of one at a time?
So these were sort of rejected ideas from the poetry collection that was featured in the intro image, Wholesome Terror. I had written initial versions of these concepts for that collection, and in the end, I decided they weren't quite ready. So I scrapped those, and actually I lost them. And recently, during a writing experience that we've been hosting at the Writing in the Dark online symposium, the one we had back in spring, if that was like March, I think, late March, we did some writing experience, and I did these poems then. And they are going to be included in my next poetry collection coming up, I think in January or February or thereabouts, titled Bibliophobia.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
Excellent. Well, there was a comment in the comments noting how you sort of adopted a different voice, a different cadence for each poem, which was really cool. So I guess since we've been talking to Sarah and Carol about prepping for readings and their approach to readings, is that something you do consciously, or does it just sort of come to you as you read the piece?
Well, so here's my history, my background with public speaking. It's extensive. It goes back to, I think, 8th grade, when I was scheduled to do an oral report for the entire class. And I threw myself down a flight of metal stairs to get out of this because I was not doing any public speaking. And my parents still made me go to school, even though I was all busted up, because they knew I had this important report to deliver. So I had to deliver this report, and I got busted up for nothing. So I figured from that point on, well, you know, especially when I became an author, wow, I really need to nail this down and figure out public speaking and especially readings. So I practiced, and very fortunately for me, one of my first readings was with Linda Addison. And for the people in the audience, you probably know of Linda Addison. If you don't, look her up online. It's easy to find out about her. She is a grandmaster, certified, and we somehow had this cadence and rhythm to our poems, and we were just sort of riffing off each other. It was a great experience, and I've been able to read with her multiple times over the years since then, and I always studied what she did, and worked to up my game, so to speak. And even so, she did a great presentation at that very same Writing in the Dark this spring, where she revealed a bunch of secrets that the late, great Jack Ketchum revealed to her when she first started doing her readings, and the ways in which he helped her. So it's just been trial and error and lots of practice. I recommend practicing like even every week, even if you don't have anything planned, because you never know when you'll be asked to do a reading. And also for me, for my writing process, I learned from Chuck Palahniuk that it's really helpful to read your work aloud before you finalize it, because that helps you find a lot of errors. So especially if poetry, a lot of it for me is verbal. I've even gotten to the point where I compose using dictation software, because it's so based on the verbal spoken component.
Interesting. Yeah. So now you've gotten to the point where how you read is influencing how you write.
Right. Yeah. It's turned into sort of this feedback loop thing. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I can't think of better people to learn or pick up reading techniques from, though, than Linda and Alice.
Yeah.
So that's great. Well, I was listening to Megan read your introduction, and it struck me, not that I wasn't aware of it, but it struck me just how many different things you have done over the years. So I remember the Dream People back when that was an online publication, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That was when I was first getting into writing in the late 90s, and then finally had some complete manuscripts late 2001. I looked around, I tried to find like the weird dark publishers, and I found this company called Eraserhead Press. And I approached them because their website said, we're looking for volunteers. And I figured, this is a good way to figure out the business, I'll get involved. And apparently I was the only one who contacted them, and they were like, well, we have this magazine where we just lost our editors, and I think Jeff and Ann Vandermeer had stepped in to do a couple issues for them on the fly, but they had other real commitments. And they're like, so what do you know about running a magazine? And I was like, I can do it. I'll figure it out. And fortunately, I was able to. It was an online magazine, and Jennifer Barnes, who some of you may know from Raw Dog Streaming Press, she stepped in and was co-editor and graphic designer for that. And we had a pretty good run, about 4 years. And that's how we met a lot of authors in the scene, who we later published when we launched Raw Dog Streaming Press and the various imprints. So yeah, that's a secret tip you may not realize. Get involved. We always need more people in the infrastructure in the scene, for magazines, for events like this, for book publishing, whatever it is. Get involved, and that's how you really get the ball rolling.
Yeah, it's a great way to learn the ropes and get to know people and start building relationships and to do some great work. And I think what was really speaking to me, though, listening to your bio, is that from that point, you've gone on to do so many different things, writing poetry, stories, novels. You've organized events. You've organized organizations. You're, a publisher, a speaker. What is it that calls to you to go in so many different directions?
Well, it's just one of those things where it just sort of happens organically. Like I said, to really get involved in writing and publishing, I took on these roles within a publishing company, running their magazine. Here's a little factoid. I didn't realize people were still doing poetry before I took over that magazine, and people started saying poetry, and I was like, oh wow, there's actual like real poetry happening. And so all this, I have like 7 or 8 poetry collections now. That all just comes from being an editor of the Dream People. But yeah, I became the publicist for Eraser Press, and I started learning all about book publicity and how all that works. And over the years, you know, we came to realize, oh well, we know all this stuff, we have all these connections, we should run a publishing company because there's stuff that needs to get out there. And then from that, we started being invited to be guests at conventions speaking about editing and publishing, and we started realizing, oh wow, we have some experience to share, either via workshops and whatnot, and got involved in teaching. And as publishers, we're very involved. Not all publishers are like this, but we're very involved with doing publicity with authors and helping to arrange events. And that just became something that I really enjoyed and realized that I had a lot of fun with. I came from a background being in the music scene in the 1990s, so there was that event aspect as well. And so it just felt natural. So since not a lot of people were doing it, I got more and more involved in helping to run events. So looking back on it, I would not have planned it out this way, but I'm very happy with where I am right now, and very fortunate too.
That's fantastic. Yeah, when I was doing research for tonight, I mean, the list of stuff that you're involved in it just kept going on and on and on. It was wonderful. And you know, I know, you know, obviously you're a writer and a poet, and you're an editor and founder of amazing cons. But also a musician and a photographer. And I was wondering what is your preferred medium? Is it writing? Is it photography? Because I've seen your photography, gosh, from Grand Rapids, and it was wonderful, gothic, dark, beautiful. But I don't know your music, but you know, does any ones kind of stand out for you just as far as the creative juices?
Well, thank you, first of all, so much for your comments about my photography. I really appreciate that. Yeah, for me, I was always involved in doing something creative. Since I was like 4, I was getting like visual art, like on local TV, and doing all these, you know, murals and things. But art is expensive and takes a lot of time. Maybe not quite as much now with photography, or especially digital photography. Back when I was growing up in the late 70s and early 80s, photography was a bit more expensive than now. But I really like visual art, and I think very visually. That's my go-to. That's where I start. Music is much more immediate because you play it and it's an actual thing. Of course, then it's much more ephemeral, and you know, that is something that requires usually a bit more collaboration with other people and a lot more resources and funds. Writing is something I always did going back to my childhood, but it was always just to like amuse me and my friends, not like as a serious thing. So first it was visual art in my childhood, then as a teenager, music, and then in my adulthood, as I had a music studio where I was recording people for money. Between sessions, I started writing screenplays much more seriously in the 90s, and started sending them out to producers, especially when musicians were late and I was sitting there wondering where my money was going to come from. And I started getting really good feedback, and I was like, oh wow, I'll just go and be a writer, especially when I won a short story contest with my first short story. I was like, oh, I'll be rich writing short stories. And that's not how it works, apparently.
That would be nice, but
So yeah, but I love doing the photography, but you can convey so much more with the written word.
Right.
well, we have some questions from the audience along the same lines, and I think we'll start with one from Christopher Ryan. How does one artistic outlet feed into your others? especially into your writing? Do they, or do you find I guess I wonder, do you try to keep them separate, or do they influence each other?
Well, I know this goes contrary to some of the authors out there, but I always have to have music playing when I'm writing.
Mm-hmm.
It can be soundtracks, it can be music with lyrics, it depends. I even usually have playlists for specific projects even. So there's always that audio component, I suppose. And as I mentioned, when I first started getting serious about writing, it was with screenplays, where you have to incorporate sound and sound design in the production, at least a little bit with your screenwriting, as it's a very big consideration. So I was always thinking in terms of audio to begin with my writing. Sometimes it all comes together where, musically I'm doing the cover art for these releases that I have and writing the lyrics and hopefully being a little poetic, at least with the lyrics, and composing music in a way that I hope is telling sort of a story, or taking you on an emotional journey with a beginning, middle, and end musically. And I've actually even done things where I've done a poetry version of a story, or a story version of a song, or a series of photography based on a song or a poem or what have you. So again, feedback loops, all comes back together, but usually things are much more rooted in writing for me overall, because again, you can convey so much with words.
Yeah, and you mentioned screenplay a few times, and I don't remember what the second poem was called, but it struck me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it struck me that it was strictly dialogue. Is that second poem? And I thought it was fantastic, because you're getting the whole story. There weren't any he said, she said, whatever. So we got everything through the dialogue. So I feel like that must have been influenced from your screenplay writing.
Yeah, thank you for that. I knew I wouldn't be walking into this with a story like a lot of your readers, so I wanted to deliver something that was closer to a narrative experience, even though it was just poetry. So I wanted to have that sort of back and forth dialogue, and it does come off kind of like, when you're reading it, it's almost like a radio play or something on the page. It's much more like an actual verse, but also, well, over the years, I've started playing these games with myself, putting limitations on things, trying to see what I can do new with the poems. So there's that component as well.
Excellent.
Great. And I think we have a few other questions.
There were two. There was one from Nicholas and one from Michelle.
Yeah. Let's see. Michelle asked about your photography. On your Instagram, you post lots of photographs, which are fantastic, by the way. How much does your photography influence your poetry and stories?
At first, it wasn't. But then, as my photography skills and photography editing skills began to improve, and I started getting feedback from people on Instagram or Facebook, I was finding some that I was even seeing them as like, oh wow, this can be a book cover. What would be the story that would go with this particular picture? And start coming up with titles and possible scenarios and things from these photos. So increasingly over the last 3 or 4 years, that has become a very big thing for me. That has started really influencing things.
Awesome. So I think we're getting a little tight on time, but we still have a few questions to ask about. I'm going to sort of combine two of them, if that's okay. We have one from, where did it go? From James Ryan, if I can find it. But he asked if you could describe what your 90s music experience was. And maybe, oh, here we go. And maybe to combine with that, I know Nicholas Dyack asked about your music interest too, about industrial music, but he wondered if you could tell us a bit about your Rage Inducer project.
Sure. Well, so in the 90s, I was involved in the sort of gothic industrial scene here in the DC, Maryland area. And I was involved with Jennifer she was doing a column about music in local papers here. And I was I was doing reviews and interviews. We were both doing reviews and interviews with all the bands who came through. And we were learning about the music that way, and we were getting those published around the country. And I was very interested in like noise and metal and all sorts of dark things. And people would be coming up to us afterwards like, "Oh wow, you should be doing soundtracks for Stephen King movies and stuff, man." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And I always remembered that. And so the Rage Inducer thing is very horror soundtrack centric and influenced, even though it's like a sort of doom metal industrial thing. So there is that. But mostly we were very popular overseas in the 90s, especially in war-torn countries. We did not catch on here. Things were going too well here, I think.
What's the old music cliche? Big in Japan?
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Great. And then I think we have maybe time for one more quick question from Amy Greck. Do you find it easier to write in a second person point of view? I guess as opposed to first or third person.
I really like the second person personally, and sometimes it's even like a default. I found, of course, people, especially editors, really do not like the second person. So I tend to try and avoid that. Unless it's like just like a small section that's embedded in a larger piece. But yeah, I can go all day on that. So I really like that. And I recommend people check that one out.
There's something about that is sort of related to the natural way we might tell a story just casually, because It's like you're walking down the street and this happens and then you do. So I find it appealing too, but you're right, it is very difficult to place a second person story. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, why don't we bring Carol and Sarah back on? Hey, Carol.
Hello.
Hey, Sarah. Thank you all for your wonderful readings tonight. Thank you for sharing your work with us. John, especially thank you for premiering. I guess that's the world premiere of these poems.
You're welcome.
What is up next for you? What projects do you have coming up that you'd like people to check out, or what do you have that's available now? And why don't we just go back to Carol and hear what you have in the works?
Well, the Taught by Time anthology just came out, so that one's available, and I dropped the link in the chat somewhere. But that's been a lot of fun to work on. I have a cryptid novella coming out in the spring, but that's a ways away, so I'll tell you more about that when we get to it. It was kind of fun, and I'm kind of pleased in terms of appearances and such. I'm going to get to do something with the Writing in the Dark Symposium in September with Mr. Lawson, so that'll be fun. I know I'm not the only one there, so that'll be cool.
Excellent. Sarah, what's up for you?
I've got some short stories coming out shortly. The Violent Vixens anthology just came out that I read from my piece there. The Bad Book, edited by John F.D. Taff, is out now. The Humans Are the Problem Monster anthology will be out soon, and I have a piece in that one about the Tooth Fairy. So that'll be available shortly. Otherwise, I'm working on edits on a new novel and then drafting 2 other ones, but everything's kind of on hold with grad school. So mostly I'm writing papers and not fiction right now.
Is that hard to go back and forth between academic writing and fiction writing? Do you just put the fiction off, or?
I struggle to kind of maintain both headspaces in one instance of time. So sometimes I have to actually physically remove myself from my desk to go write fiction somewhere else because this space has become so school.
I get it.
There seemed to be a lot of teeth tonight between
Yeah.
Barry and John.
Yeah,
John, I have to say, like, I was really feeling a Twinkie when you first started that story, and I was like, oh, I could go for a Twinkie right now. And then we got to the teeth, and it kind of just mixed the whole thing. I didn't want anything after that.
Yeah, I want to know if Sarah's tooth, yeah. Sarah, does your tooth fairy work in a bakery? Because that would be the ultimate answer for John's poem. Yeah.
Not a bakery, no. But there is some tooth porridge involved.
Oh,
okay.
Which one is that one in again? Tell me again.
Humans Are the Problem, a monster anthology.
Okay, that one's coming to me when it gets here. Yeah.
And John, what dessert treat are you going to ruin for Megan next?
Candy corn.
I think I have one in the horror issue of the Southwest Review coming out next month, edited by Andy Davidson. I've got a poem in there, and it was something I wrote when I was in Portugal, and it has this little. Have you ever had these little Portuguese custard pies or custard like tarts?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
something like that. Yeah. They're good, but watch out. Okay, very good.
It's like dessert horror.
Right.
There you
go. You're gonna tell us they're not gluten free, right? That's the answer. Yeah.
That's the real horror.
Yeah, that could do it.
And what else do you have in the works that we should look out for?
Okay, well, I'm going to be teaching a workshop at Clarion West this October on horror. So definitely check that out. There's a lot of brilliant people doing horror-related workshops for Clarion West this year. And as I mentioned, Bibliophobia, this has been in the making for years now. It'll be I think my 8th poetry collection coming out early next year. So I'm excited about that. And more rage inducer, horror-inspired music coming soon on Bandcamp. So keep an eye out there.
Is that where that the best place for people to find rage inducer music? Bandcamp?
Yeah, rageinducer.com is about to launch, but for now, keep your eyes on Bandcamp. And in terms of general writing stuff, I'll be hosting lots of writing sprints on a regular basis for free. Keep an eye on my social media for that, and definitely attend Writing in the Dark if you can, because we'll be doing some writing sprints there, and lots of stuff gets done like these poems. You'd be amazed at how much you can do when you have that synergy going with a lot of other writers writing alongside you.
Very cool.
Wonderful.
I just want to chime in. We were talking about music lists and playlists to write to. Rage Inducer, is like one of my go-tos. Yeah. And really, that sets the mood really, really well.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think we have to just
fun.
take this one question, which, oops, I hit the wrong thing. Here we go. John.
Seriously.
Not really. I've been forcing myself to lately because I was falling apart. So
Right. Yes, you got to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And I just a quick nod to Rob Atone in the audience, who pointed out that Megan read a second-person story on Galactic Terrors. Let's see, where I forget. Well, when did you read? In February, I think, last February.
I think it was for Women in Horror Month. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I can't comment, but I have seen the comments. I really appreciate that, Robert. Thank you.
Awesome. And Megan, what about you? Do you have anything coming up we should be on the lookout for?
I have a story. I honestly don't know if I can see anything out loud yet, but I do have a story. It'll be online, and I without going into too much detail, I get to play in someone else's sandbox, which was so much fun. So I really had a good time. But hopefully in the next few weeks, I'll be able to, put something out on social media and you guys can read it.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it. That's great.
How about you, Jim? I know we just saw the new cover of your new collection, right?
Yes. Yep. On the Hierophant Road, coming out in October from Raw Dog Screaming Press with a beautiful cover by Bradley Sharp. And yeah, I'm really excited about this one. It's a collection primarily of my sort of fantasy and science fiction oriented stories. There definitely is plenty in there on the dark side for people who like my horror fiction. John is nodding. Thank you. But it's a different experience from my last collection, On the Night Border, which is also published by Raw Dog Screaming Press. And so far it's gotten a good response. Booklist gave it a starred review, and Library Journal gave it a good review, and I'm just really excited to see what people think. So
wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. So I think before we sign off, just a quick reminder, Galactic Terrors, we do this every second Thursday of the month. Feel free to come back. Remember to do that like and subscribe thing, or sign up for our newsletter. I'll put the URL up one more time. Carol, maybe you could put that back in the comments one last time for anybody who's interested. We have a really great lineup next month, and I say that even though I'm part of it. October 14th, we'll be featuring readings from me, Andy Davidson, and Tanya Hurley. And we're very excited about that. I also think that we're going to have, and I hope to be announcing this officially in the next week or so, a very special addition to the program. I can't say too much about it, but for those in the chapter or anyone who remembers the HWA's old in-person readings at the Morbid Anatomy Museum back in the days when that was going, we have recovered some video files that were misplaced, to say it politely, by me. I'm completely culpable, from some great readings, and I'm working to bring those forward. I think people will be excited when they hear who we have, if we can do that. So watch our Facebook, HWA NY Facebook page for announcements, and the Galactic Terrors newsletter. So it'll definitely be in there once we have everything finalized. And if you want more information about the New York chapter, HWANY.org. Very easy.
And let me also throw, I can't get the newsletter thing in the chat right now, but if you go to HWANY.org, that's where you can sign up for it. You can do that right there at HWANY.org.
I think I can put that back in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, I've been totally indulging myself here as my night off from hosting by going in and commenting on YouTube, but I have to do it on my phone, and it got tired of working with me. So really fun to hang out with all these creative people tonight. What a great crowd, and great readings, everybody. Thank you. And thank you, Megan. Everyone. Thank you, Megan. You were a gem.
Thank you so much for having me, allowing me to do this. This was I've never done a hosting experience before, so this was really a lot of fun.
Really?
Yeah, and I have to say that you guys are really inspiring. I feel really inspired to hit my notebooks. So thank you for your wonderful readings.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. And one last, since we had a lot of talk about sweets and desserts, I'm just going to put up this one last cake picture that Carol found.
It's so rich. It's a killer cake. Yeah.
That's it. If those little mice are made of marshmallow, I'm all over it.
No, those are mice. Oh wait, no.
Right. Thank you all for joining us. Please come back next month. We hope to see you again, and we hope you enjoyed the readings and the Q&A with the authors. That's it. Everyone, John, Sarah, Carol, thank you so much for sharing your work, and we'll see you all soon.
Okay, and we can all hang on for a second when the show is over and chat.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.